And welcome back. Thank you for making time to join us on Opinion Court. You could get in touch with us on 22422, our SMS line. If you're online at Citizen TV Kenya, at Citizen TV News, that's on Twitter. And on Facebook, we go by the same names. We would love to hear from you. I am at Ann Kiguta, and with an E, please use the hashtag Opinion Court. I want to reintroduce my panel to you and our topic of discussion. To my immediate right, Senator Kimani Wamatangi. He's a TNE legislator. In the middle, Edward Kisiangani, our resident political analyst. And across from me, MP Dan Manzo of Wiper Party. He is also a lawyer by profession. Our conversation today is in the context of these latest very disturbing remarks by the ODM Nairobi chairperson, Georgia Ladwa. But it must be said that these comments are not isolated, and both the politicians in studio both come from parties who have members that have been accused of hate speech, and so no one really here is holier than thou in this conversation. And in light of that, what's your take on all of this, Senator? Yeah,
I want to say from the onset that yes, freedom is free, and we need to emphasize that freedom also comes with responsibilities, and there is no way that anyone can expect to have one and leave the other. And looking back at what's happened now and what's continued to happen, it's a very worrying trend, and especially the latest remarks by Aladwa. I mean, if you look back at the history of this country, coming from 2007, heading towards 2017, what has happened in between? And let me quickly add this, just for the sake of our viewers to remember. About a year ago, this same man was arrested again on same charges of hate speech. He was taken to police custody, and surprising enough, his party, ODM, called a rally in Uhuru Park. None other than the principals actually quoted the Constitution. And I think the most misunderstood part of the Constitution is Chapter 4 of the Constitution, Article 33 on the Bill of Rights, because this is what they were all quoting, that there is freedom of expression. And let's be also clear that that particular article very quickly in subsection 2 goes on to express what freedom of expression does not consist of. It does not consist of incitement. It does not consist of hate speech itself. And I think, because if you look at the trend, if action is not taken, decisive action, quick action, to ensure that there is a deterrent in the future, and you know, you've said that none of us is innocent.
Yes, because in TNA you have the case of Moses Kuria, and we waited to see tough disciplinary action from the relevant party organ, and we didn't.
Yeah, but I'll say this. You see, responsibility is individual. And one makes those kind of remarks, and you carry that responsibility. But you can also imagine in this context, for example, like in the Aladwa case, when he was speaking, he is actually naming names of the principals and saying, actually, I'm speaking in the context of winning or losing a general election, and these are the consequences. And you'd be asking yourself, if
one would argue that in Moses Kuria's case, that was the same thing.
And I'm
the
sure,
point was the same.
I'm sure, Anne, just to wrap up what I'm saying, my point is this. If somebody is saying that if Wamatangi does not win the election, then people are going to die, you'd expect that the first thing that Wamatangi would do, being a patriotic Kenyan, is to come out. The question that is right now on every Kenyan's mind is, where are the core principles? Where are those mentioned? For example, like Raila Odinga, why did he come out with his team and said we disassociate ourselves like we did in TNA? I mean, when Kuria went to speak those words, immediately the party came out all the leaders of the party, we said we are not party to that. Why haven't we seen Raila?
Fair enough. I think your point is made, and I do want to invite the other members of the panel to comment on the same. But I suppose on the point that you're making about TNA speaking out, it's one thing to talk the talk, it's another thing to actually have action taken on a member that proves that what you're saying, that you do not associate with these comments, they will not be tolerated and certain action is taken. And I suppose it is that action that is missing. We'll come back to the role of political parties a little later. Manzo, your thoughts?
Yes, I want to say that I was one of the people in the rally at Kibera, and I followed the whole speech. When somebody is accused of having committed a crime, there are certain things, certain parameters which the investigator looks at, and that's why the director of public prosecution has said investigate the matter. Because when you investigate, you may actually find out that there is no offense disclosed, that the person was only being expressive and emotional. So
when you say that if Raila Odinga does not win the next election, Kenyans will die, that to you is
it must be emotional. It must be connected with the whole speech, and you must see where the person was going. Because in the criminal law, because this is an act of parliament which acts on people who allegedly have committed crimes, there must be what you call mens rea, and then the action. So you must intend, which is called mens rea, and then the actus reus, where you now implement your imagination.
Let me simplify it.
Yes.
Is that a responsible statement to come from a political leader, knowing full well that we're getting into an electioneering period and that the country is yet to heal from 2007? Do you stand by that statement as Daniel Manzo?
Well, I don't have to stand by it, but he said if election is stolen, you can see there's a condition that will not accept it. He goes on to explain himself, and he says, he goes on later on when he was interviewed, he explained what he meant by people will die.
Yes, and that explanation is one that any person would scoff at, because he did not say anything about humor. In fact, he was talking about in the context of a loss. So his explanation that it would be humorous because he would, people would be dying of laughter is quite frankly just ridiculous. Having said that, though, I think the question that remains, and coming from the background of what Senator Wamatangi has said, because we've not heard specifically from Raila Odinga, who was specifically mentioned in that speech, and now with your sort of roundabout explanation, one does wonder whether the court coalition is standing by George Aladwa. Yes or no? What's your position?
You see, we must also give the court principal Raila Odinga an opportunity. This is just happened on Sunday while he was away.
On Tuesday?
Tuesday, while he was away on the Mashujaa Day. He got into the country yesterday. He issued a press statement, and he promised to issue further press statements. So it could be he has an opportunity still to associate or disassociate himself with the matter.
And yourself, sir, because you're here.
I said I was in that rally.
You were.
And I believe in opposition. Now that I'm in opposition, that opposition is in the constitution and must play its role, so that. You
stand by George Aladwa's statement. You were in the rally, yes or no?
Now that I'm going to be defending him as a lawyer when he goes to the CID, I'll have to be there, and it will not be fair for me to preempt.
So you're saying you're acting on his behalf?
I will act on his behalf.
Well, we don't have confirmation from your would-be client. I would hope that if he's watching, he would confirm it to us, because then we could really...
I've acted for him before and for the coalition.
Yes, well, your client has not confirmed that you are your supposed client, that you're actually acting for him. Prof, what do you think?
I think, Anne, this is a very bad thing. It's unacceptable. First of all, whatever statements that are being made by likes of Moses Kuria, now Aladwa, anybody who makes statements that can incite our people against each other must know that that is unacceptable. So the statement that I've just seen on television, 7 o'clock news this evening, by George Aladwa is unacceptable. So it doesn't matter how much you moralize about it. If I was a real judge, I would put Mansu in today. But since I'm not, I
you just have to sit next to him.
Yeah, sit next to him. It's unacceptable. So we can't justify that. But what we need to do, and this thing that we are hearing gives us an opportunity to have a fresh start in this country. The battle against ethnic hatred has not been won.
Have we failed to learn completely from our mistakes? First
of all, you can see, if you listen to the president's speech on yesterday, he was, on Tuesday, he said that we recognize that we have not reached where we wanted to be, and even we don't think that the direction we are going is where this country should be. So that shows that there is a big challenge. And for me, the way to look at it is that ethnicity has been commodified. If you have it at your advantage, you enjoy power, wealth, and jobs and tenders. But if it deserts you, you suffer poverty and misery. So we must investigate this situation from that perspective. But even after doing that, there is another bit. How many, and this is the question you asked, let us not behave like the caparros of this world who rush to the fire scene to put off fires when things have gone bad. That is not the approach. The approach is to ask, as citizens, how can we deal with the ethnic problem? You know, as citizens, we must do what's right, but the leadership should also do what's right. The bigger challenge, the easiest challenge is to arrest Aladwa and put him in, or Kuria. But how many people in this country think like Aladwa or Kuria, but who we don't see talk?
Right.
If there is an explosion, they will just act. They will not talk about it. So the reason why I'm raising that matter is this, that therefore, it doesn't matter whether you put in Aladwa or what. There is a bigger problem, and this problem must be confronted with a different perspective. And the final thing that I want to say about that is that the perspective that remains as an option for us is for us, to avoid doing things that support ethnic hatred. If you are a citizen, a normal citizen, stop preaching ethnic hatred. If you are a leader, stop practicing corruption and employing people from your community and still expect people to look at it as a normal thing.
And I hear you, Prof. And sorry, I want to cut you short there because I want to interrogate all the things that you've talked about in detail, but a little later. But you did touch on the fact that ethnicity has been commodified, I believe is how you phrased it. Senator Wamatangi, specifically from your coalition that boasts of tyranny of numbers, why is it to you that just your own thoughts, why do we always boil down to ethnic incitement in our politics?
No, well, I'm happy to comment about that, but let me first, make a few comments on
quickly, if you would,
very quickly, because my friend Manzo is a lawyer of good repute, but indeed, if as nationals of this country we adopt that kind of attitude to outright criminal behavior, to outright criminal acts, which can put this country back on fire, then we'll be doing a huge disservice. And I would want to say to my colleague, I think this is the time when we have to act for the country. We have to stand right and say wrong is wrong. And whether it is somebody from your party, whether you are a lawyer, you're also Kenyan. You also have children in this country. You have destiny to look at for the future of this country. And so I think it is very, very important for us to be outright. And as I agree with what Prof has said, we also must stop labeling everything that we are just going around ethnicity. Let people carry responsibility. I mean, because if I as an individual goes out to a public platform and I know that this is precisely what I'm saying in my right mind, and this would be the consequences, I should not be judged that I'm speaking on behalf of the community.
But you're a politician. Why does your politics always boil down to, and not yours specifically, but I mean of the political class, always boil down to ethnic incitement? What is it?
It's because, one, okay, fine, it will go towards ethnic incitement, but it is very easy for individuals to hide behind that curtain of saying that this is about the tribe, it's about the community, it's not about me. Now look at this particular case that we're talking about. I mean, it is there. Somebody is saying that this is what's going to happen if we don't win the election, even by perception. You know what winning is about. If I perceive that the winning is not fair, then I will tell my people, and he goes ahead to ask, Atikwani kuna nini? Let
me ask now, you, Manzo, I beg your pardon, sir. I just want to cut you short so that we can move the conversation along. Manzo, does this mean... And I realize that your answer may perhaps be shrouded in even more mystery, I beg your pardon, since you claim to be acting for Aladwa. But is the ICC no longer a deterrent, do you think, generally speaking, when it comes to hate speech? And I ask this because in the previous election, you know, the politicking that happened thereafter was the fact that we didn't have violence was because, you know, we saw cases at the ICC. But now we're starting to hear similar sentiments come up again. Has the ICC failed as a deterrent?
I don't think the ICC has failed. What has happened is now there is a hate speech against ICC itself from Jubilee Coalition. But just to address what you have just said, you know, first of all, there is now proposed criminal proceedings against Aladwa. So the moment there is proposed criminal proceedings, first of all, he has to be investigated. And then after the investigation, then presented before a court, so that he can accord himself, he can defend himself with the help of his lawyers. So it will not be good to go on to convict him, to begin convicting him here. Just as it has happened with the courier. We have to await for the process of criminal justice system to be done so that people can learn from that. But if in the case of the ICC, it's, first of all, it should begin at home with our own courts. And then when our own courts are unable to do it, remember, as a country, we are signatory to the ICC for now. And therefore the ICC can take over.
You've talked about our own courts. I want to play your clip. This is Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi. Of course, he's a well-known city lawyer, but a former member, I believe, of the JSC. Listen to what he had to say about the state of local courts, and then we'll talk.
What do you do? This country, everybody is corrupt. We are a society that's corrupt. I've participated in various phases of judicial reforms in this country. Yes. And when we're recruiting for new judges under this new constitution, I mean, we try to do our best. We try to look for the best judges, like the Supreme Court, you know, the Court of Appeal. And let's be fair, the Supreme Court, in my view, before this crisis, was doing a wonderful job. You could not hear anything about corruption or anything. It's a court beyond any kind of reproach. The Court of Appeal has done wonderful. You know, the Court of Appeal now has been centralized. There's a court in Malindi, there's a court in Nyeri, there's a court in Kisumu, and there are 15 judges here in Nairobi. So they are doing very well, and you don't hear corruption a lot about that court. But where there is a crisis is the High Court. And corruption is there now in a big way.
Think corruption has crept back to the judiciary. Prof, let me come to your views and put it in the context of what he said. Is a local process, a local court process, the only thing that can act as a deterrent against these sort of statements? And also bear in mind that we've had in previous cases, some of these things go to court, but we don't have anyone behind the slammers for the same.
I think, to be fair to the courts, I probably, like Ahmed Nasir, I have a lot of complaints about our judicial system. But the courts do not themselves investigate. The courts will receive information, people will come and argue their case in court. So it's up to the Director of Public Prosecutions to do good investigation. So you can't blame the courts. I think the problem lies with the investigation, both CID and the public prosecutor. So that is the part we want to clean. So the local process can only be sanitized if there is enough team, I mean a more powerful team to do the investigation. But with regard to the international process, which you have just mentioned, Anne, when the ICC process has been demonized, initially demonized by Jubilee, and that's why you are seeing this escalation of hate speech. People know very well that there is even a move in Parliament to withdraw from the ICC. So if we kill each other again, the international community has already been told to keep off Kenya. So now the warlords are rebuilding. They now know you can still go and mess. Even up to the African Union, they are saying we can solve our own problems. So now that people have seen the ICC window is closing, and we might not do that, so they can now go back to the pre-2007 election. I mean, these are some of the things that would worry us. But as far as I am concerned, Anne, you asked Senator Wamatangi about the issue of ethnicity. And then, you know, this Aladwa is saying, if we don't win the elections, we do ABCD. The reason is exactly what I've said, that people think elections can reward ethnicities, communities. So elections mean jobs. Elections mean, if we win the elections, it means getting our people employed. And devolution was supposed to answer that, isn't it, Professor? It was supposed to mean that regardless of, you know, what political affiliation a region has, that it will still get resources. Has the devolution process been mismanaged to the extent that you feel that communities still feel that it is only political power that can result, you know, in empowering the grassroots? I think that there are problems within the devolution sector, because in terms of implementation of the devolution, there is money there. First of all, it is being squandered left and right, the money that has been taken there, but there is still a sizable chunk of money and power still centralized. And people are looking at it they are looking at it in this way, that if you control central power and you still have access to these resources, you can manipulate devolution. So really, the belief is that at the lower level, you know, where there is devolution, that is for small timers. But the big timers wanted to take the ultimate power at the top. These big timers. The bigger timers are, for example, Anne, I mean it's very serious. In this court, you know, everybody's serious. Aladwa hopes that if Raila Odinga becomes the president, he would probably become the cabinet secretary. Well, that's for foreign affairs. That's a huge assumption on your part. He knows that probably if Uhuru continues being the president, then he will never see that post. So it is a matter of life and death. Huge and we must deal assumptions with that. There, huge assumptions there. But I get you. They think the stronger the politic, that they may reap something should their side win. Dan, tell me, are we unable to politic on real issues? And the reason being, we've had, you know, such strong sentiments being expressed over very important things. Development, you know, cabinet is not spending, various ministries are not spending the money that they were given to, you know, actualize development. We've been talking about the economy in the past week and how it's faring. There's so many things, the state of corruption, etc. But when it comes to the ballot, even the elites seem to go back to an ethnic cocoon or tribal mobilization. Why do you think that is, while we have real issues that are bigger than our tribes? Yes, first I want to mention on the issue of corruption and the courts. The one Ahmed Asir was talking about, the clip. First of all, before we accuse the judges, we must also look at ourselves as a country. That, you know, corruption is really eating us up. You can see leaked exams, that is corruption. A parent is teaching a child that I can steal exams for you. What happens if you steal exams all the way to become a surgeon? And then you've got to operate on a patient. So this corruption, from children to parents to courts to elections itself. You know, you will not be elected unless a lot of people demand something from you. Why don't we politic on issues like that? Why don't we go to the vote over whether or not this government performed on the issue of corruption? Why aren't we going to the vote on whether or not we've had development, on whether or not the economy is doing well? Why does it have to go back? Explain that, Anne. Prof. I will explain that. This has to do with the nature of the African state. It's not just a Kenyan problem, it's the African state, the way it's configured. There is something you call in political studies, what you call the corporatist practice of a state, which means in what ways does what a state do relate to what the people want. In Africa, the leaders have ethnicized the state, and they fear that they cannot go to the people to ask them what the people want to be done for them. Instead, they tell the people what they want to do for the people. And they often get it wrong. But in the Western state, the difference in Western Europe and North America is that when somebody is crafting a policy for development, for a campaign, he goes to the people, and the people tell him, this is what we want you to do, and this is what we want you to do. So this is the problem. We need a reform of the African state. The state is highly ethnicized because it's the only way you can
How do you reform it?
We reform it by changing institutions, doing what is right. Even us as individuals, it's going to be a long process, Anne. When you are ahead of a school, ahead of a college, and you start employing people from your own end, you take all the tenders and start taking money even for goods which are not supplied. That is immoral. And how do we punish this? We have seen so many people in this country making those mistakes, but even when you take them in, they go back to the community. And the institutions that are there don't punish. So what we need is leadership that does not tolerate that.
Prof, you've talked about reforming institutions. Somebody would argue that we've done this already, you know, with the new constitution. Did we put, well, not so new now, did we put too much faith, do you think, in what the constitution would have delivered and the resultant pieces of legislation? And if you would, in answering that, Senator, also touch on the role of independent officers. Are they being proactive enough to arrest the situation before we get to it?
Yeah. One, let me partly agree with what Professor was saying, but also fairly disagree, you know, honorably, because I think one, in this country, as you've asked finally, I think we have institutions. We have a set of laws. We have a new constitution that, if it is applied without fear, without favor, properly, then we should be able to get the result of what we want, and that is good governance and a responsible citizenry. Now, if we continue to tell ourselves that we are so ethnic, that we are so anti-reform, we are so anti-law, we can only depend on the ICC, we can only depend on somebody out there to come and correct us, then we'll never get it right. We must say this because, I mean, tell me, Anne, if a small petty thief will be arrested and put in jail, and they will be in jail for as long as their term lasts, why wouldn't we go and jail somebody who is inciting the public?
But Senator,
and let me finish, Prof.
Yes.
Because the question that Anne has asked finally is very important. Now, what we need to see, and this should be the beginning of this example, is these independent institutions taking up their roles seriously, taking action as they're expected. For example, look at what is expected now of the National Cohesion Commission. It is to take immediate action and ensure that what action they take becomes a deterrent. And in future, if somebody wants to stand up and say what Aladu has been saying, they will know that there are consequences towards those kind of
Gentlemen, I want to come to you now with your final round of comments. Silly season has begun in earnest. This is where we'll hear everything. What must Kenyans keep in mind? Because the back does stop with an ordinary Kenyan watching this program. It is up to them whether they will listen to statements like that and act on it, or whether they will choose a different path. I welcome your final views. I'll begin with you, Dan.
Yes, I want to say that, first of all, Kenya belongs to all of us, and we have only one Kenya. So each one of us have a duty to take care of our country. And that it is true that we should be responsible for whatever we say and whatever we do. We must also tolerate each other so that whoever takes government does not think the other persons are not part of the country. And also that there's a lot of hope with the new constitution in Kenya. If only we practice it the way we passed it, then we are going to have devolution working, and we have equal sharing of opportunities in the country for everybody, and then we'll have a good nation. And I believe there's a lot of hope for Kenya, and I believe Kenya is moving in a good direction. We are going to succeed as a country together.
Senator, what must Kenyans keep in mind?
Well, what we need to keep in mind as a country is that we have a lot of good things going for us. The only thing we have to stop is, one, being negative about ourselves, and secondly, being people who take responsibility for what happens. And as long as we still have a section of this community of Kenyans who still continue, and as you've asked, propagate negativity, ethnicity, fight, just because they don't have a good vision for this country, then we'll keep on moving backwards. And I believe that it is time to take action. It is time to take the call and make sure that those who require to pay for their actions, for their talk, will be able to pay now, so that the future can be brighter.
Prof, the bottom line?
The bottom line is that we have only one country. There are not two. If we destroy this country by what is happening, we shall regret forever. So what I ask my fellow citizens is that, as citizens, do the right thing. Don't discriminate against people. Talk to people, criticize them, but run short of thinking that they should die. They should live so that you can talk and then correct this country if it goes wrong. Anywhere it goes wrong, that correction must be put in place. The second thing, the leadership. Citizens have a responsibility, but the leadership have a responsibility. I'm not ashamed to say the top leadership must lead the way to respect institutions. If you look at what has happened in this country in the last few months, the fact that the judiciary has ruled that teachers require to be paid because they were on a legal strike, and the top leadership of the country would not respond to that, that is how we weaken institutions. And the message that goes out is that institutions don't work. So the other responsibility is for the top leadership to stop violating the constitution by undermining independent institutions. When it's like that, we are going to work well, and our country will get back to where
I thank you all for your views. We're back with